My name is Ben Burgis. I'm the author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. And the special guest for this video is Ryan Lake, who is, among other things, the artist who did the cover image on that book. He is also the author of an award-winning dissertation about free will and determinism. And he's somebody who knows a lot more than I do about the history of Greek philosophy, which is why I thought it might be good to have him in this video. He actually is both one of the creators of and is going to be a participant in a study abroad program in Greece for the university we both work for. So it's Georgia State University Perimeter College. And so I thought I'd have him on at the beginning of this video to explain the Sorites paradox.
Sure, yeah. So the Sorites paradox, also called the heap paradox, which is just what the word Sorites means in ancient Greek, first formulated by the philosopher Eubulides or Eubulides, or however you want to put the emphasis. I'm sure I'm mangling the proper pronunciation there.
He tells me that he actually has studied Greek.
I did study Greek. I'm trying to relearn it before we do this study abroad thing. So a simple formulation here is you start with the claim that just take a large number. So say like 1 million grains of sand. We'd all agree that's a heap of sand. If you take away 1 grain of sand, clearly that's still a heap. 999,999 grains of sand is still a heap of sand if 1 million grains of sand is. So the logic is taking away 1 grain of sand from a heap of sand doesn't turn it into a non-heap. The problem is you can repeat that. Take away 1 more, take away one more, get all the way down to 1 grain of sand. Is that still a heap? That seems like an absurd result. But the only way to avoid it is to do something equally absurd, which is draw an arbitrary dividing line and say at 536,001 grains of sand that it's no longer a heap. That also just seems absurd to pick a point and say it's not a heap. So that's the paradox, that neither solution seems satisfactory.
Right. So that's the Sorites paradox. And now, on a completely unrelated note, or so it might seem, here is a clip of friend of the channel, Ben Shapiro, giving his thoughtful and nuanced perspective on abortion and reproductive rights.
The game goes like this. At which point should you be able to kill this baby? Okay, we're going to play a game called When Should You Be Able to Kill This Baby? Because I've been told by people like Hillary Clinton that you're able to kill this baby all the way up to the very end, right? 32 to 30 weeks. Right? And that's when the baby is fully formed. It can be born alive. It is a fully formed human being. I've watched 2 of them come out of my wife. These are human beings. These are not balls of tissue. These are not clusters of cells. And I'm sick of being told that it's just an abortion. I don't like the euphemisms. It's not a termination of a pregnancy. It's a termination of a human life. Okay, it's a murder of a human being when you're talking about these babies. And this idea that you get to choose that. Look, you got to choose a lot of things in life. You don't get to choose another human being's death. That's not something you get to choose. So when is it okay to kill this? When is it okay to kill this? Is it okay to kill this thing at week 14 when the heart is pumping several quarts of blood through the body every day? How about week 15 when the baby has an adult's taste buds? How about month 4 when the bone marrow is beginning to form? How about that? Or how about weeks 9 and 10 when the baby's teeth are already beginning to form? Its fingernails are already beginning to develop. We're talking about 2 months old, right? The baby can turn the head and frown. The baby can hiccup. Is that okay to kill? How about week 4? By the end of the week 4, the kid is already 10,000 times larger than the fertilized eggs was. There's already the beginnings of eyes and legs and hands. There are already brain waves detectable. Mouth and lips are present. Fingernails are forming. How about week 3? By the end of the 3rd week, the kid's backbone and spinal column and nervous system are forming. The liver and kidneys and intestines are beginning to take shape. How about day 22? The heart's already beating with the child's blood, which may be of a different blood type than the mother. So where in here exactly do you think it's okay to murder that kid because you have a personal convenience issue?
Wow, that was something.
It was. He was very animated.
Yeah. If you're loud, you're right.
Yeah, I don't see how somebody could talk that quickly and sound that confident and be completely full of shit. I don't think that's a possible combination.
No.
So, that was a few years ago, but let's talk about something that happened more recently before we get back to that. So this summer, the House of Representatives passed a law raising the national minimum wage to $15 an hour, which is, of course, at this stage, just purely symbolic, because obviously, the Senate is controlled by Republicans, and that's not going to happen. But it's still it's still a very good thing. That's
still a good thing. Yeah, they still feel like they have to pay lip service to this at least. So that's something.
Yeah. The fact that they feel that as recently as 2016, the Democratic nominee for president wasn't willing to sign on to this.
Yeah.
So the fact that they feel the need to pay lip service to this is definitely a sign that the Fight for 15 movement, which started up back in 2012, is making a lot of headway, and this is cause for celebration.
Yeah.
So right after it passed, one of my favorite members of Congress, Rashida Tlaib, from Detroit, which features the best the best congresswomen, the best hockey team.
Kid Rock.
Yes, sir. We're both from Michigan, so that's our poet laureate, Kid Rock. All right, maybe less so that last one, but lots of good things in
Not
Detroit.
all great, but some great things.
Yeah. But Rashida Tlaib is good, and she right after this passed, she made this statement where she was talking to a group that supported the change, and she was saying, well, really, when this got started in 2012, $15 made sense. That would really be enough to for people to live on, lift low-wage workers out of poverty. But now we should be aiming higher, especially because even if this House bill had gone anywhere, it wouldn't have completely kicked in until 2025, right? That's how these things always work. They're phased in over several years. And $15 in 2025 is not what $15 was in 2012 in terms of purchasing power. So what she said was, well, really $15 made sense then, but now the range we should be looking at, for what we should really be shooting for is somewhere between 18 to 20. That would be like the reasonable range now. That would be approximately equivalent.
Sounds like she hates America.
Yes, clearly hates America.
Trying to destroy the economy.
Loves the terrorist. Wants to build gulags. That's the kind of sense you get from hearing a statement like that. All right, or some people apparently get. So. A lot of conservatives responded to this with just incredulous laughter, basically. They just couldn't believe what they were hearing, after, my God, $15 is bad enough. Now we're going to talk about 20? Of course, they all ignored the fact that what she actually said was the range we should be looking at is like maybe 18 to 20, but there were some caveats in there. Doesn't matter, right? So $20 an hour, which they all thought was absolutely outrageous. And so there were a lot of competitive tweeting by right-wingers who are basically all making the same dumb joke. So here, for example, is Megan McArdle.
This one, $15. By the way, when we started it, it should have been $15. Now I think it should be $20. Picture America rising here now. It should be $20. No, it should be $20 an hour. Right? $18 to $20 an hour at this point is everything, all the costs. And so because they say, oh, this is going to raise the cost. But I can tell you, milk has gone up. Eggs has gone up. Everything has gone up.
And here is Ben Shapiro quote tweeting and one-upping Megan McArdle.
$1,000 an hour, right? $18 to $20 an hour at this point is everything, all the costs.
$1,000 an hour.
Yeah.
Now, even though I think we're both godless leftist indoctrinating college professors, I think we'd probably agree that 1,000 would be too much. That if nothing else, the vast majority of businesses, even if you socialize them, so profit wasn't a factor, just the total revenues of the business before it's divided into wages and profits is considerably less than $1,000 times the number of employees, per hour, right? So $1,000 would probably be a bad idea because the economy would collapse and we'd all starve to death.
But Ben, if a $5 increase is okay, then why not a $10 increase? And then why not a $20 increase? And so on, right up to 1,000.
That gets us to 1,000. That reminds me of the Sorites paradox.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are actually now there are lots of interesting, unsolved, complicated philosophical problems about vagueness. If you look at like the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and you do a search for vagueness and read their article on borderline applications of vague predicates and read some of the articles that are referenced in there, you can happily blow your whole weekend doing that and end up much more confused than you ever were.
Absolutely, yeah.
But one thing that I'm pretty sure everybody who's thought about this agrees on, because it would be insane not to, is that you can't make the logical leap from there's no clear non-arbitrary cutoff point to there's no real distinction and there aren't clear cases on both sides of the distinction. So I've already forgotten exactly how many grains of sand you suggested might be the cutoff point.
536,001, I think.
All right, 536,001. Well, even if you do hold the position that say that 536,002 grains of sand would be a heap and 536,000 would be a non-heap, that even if that does seem hopelessly arbitrary, it's still clearly true that 3 grains of sand is not a heap of sand and 1,000,000 grains of sand clearly is a heap of sand. So there's still a real heap, non-heap distinction, and there's still clear cases on both sides. And similarly, even though we're obviously, as I said, godless indoctrinating, left-wing professors. So we're on the baby-killing side of the argument.
Right.
When it comes to abortion. I don't think either of us would support the position that if the due date is Tuesday, abortion on Monday is totally cool.
Yeah, not on a Monday.
Or, and like, Tuesday morning is right out. So, because clearly when it comes to the kinds of features that seem to be morally significant, when it comes to the difference between, say, a 2-week-old fetus and, a 6-week-old baby, the cognitive development, etc., that seem to be morally significant, ability to feel pain, things like that, right? And you could say, all right, there's some gray areas in there, you might not be sure what to think about, or you might think that, the woman's right to bodily autonomy is more important, but clearly at some point there, right, there's a cutoff point where it's no longer reasonable, and sure, good luck narrowing it down to what the day is.
Sure. The boundary's fuzzy, but there are clear cases of person and non-person.
The boundary's fuzzy, but there are clear cases on both ends. Yeah. And similarly, look, if Tankies in the comments, want to get upset at me about my Menshevism here, that's fine. But I think $1,000 an hour would be too much. But it doesn't really follow from that 20 would be unreasonable.
Yeah.
And so in both cases, what Shapiro is doing is committing what's called the Continuum fallacy. That's the logical leap from saying, okay, there's a continuum, there's no clear cutoff point, and therefore there's no real distinction, right? That like somebody who has 3 hairs of head, hairs on his head, if he's not bald, then if he's, we can't say that he's bald and Fabio is not bald, right? So.
Great news for bald people.
Yeah, but it still seems a little silly.
Yeah.
So in both cases, Shapiro is committing this logical leap. And you'll be shocked to hear that this is actually not the only mistake that he makes about reasoning. despite the fact that he is very loud and fast, that he actually also messes some other stuff up too. Mm-hmm. Now, there is a invitation out there if he ever wants to have a chat about this in person. That we could get into it there, and we could kind of do all this all at once, and
I'm sure he'll take you up on this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He loves challenging people to debates. He mocks people who won't debate him, so I'm sure he'll accept your challenge.
Yeah, right. Because look, I mean, I'd understand if you were doing, if you were debating, Noam Chomsky on Monday, and and it's gonna be Cornel West on Wednesday, mm-hmm. and he just couldn't fit me in on Tuesday,
sure,
right?
Sure.
But really seem to be interested in getting into with any of those people, and he does seem to find a lot of time to destroy nervous 19-year-olds on college campuses mm-hmm. who are asking questions of a public figure for the first time. So you think, why not go to the source of the godless left-wing indoctrination?
Yeah. If destroying these students is satisfying, just think how satisfying it'll be to destroy one of the professors.
Exactly.
I'm sure he's down for that.
Okay. I'm sure he's down for that. He's probably just still perusing his schedule, trying to find mm-hmm. a good time. Yeah. But on the off chance that does not happen, then we can keep on doing these for a few weeks. So tune in next week for the next installment of Ben Shapiro Commits the Blank Fallacy.
Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.